Hey, this took a sharp right turn.
Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant, and I'm delighted to be back here at Hasselblad's New York Experience Studio with one of my favorite folks in the industry, Dan Wang, Director of Marketing Americas for Hasselblad. Dan, this place is beginning to feel like a home away from home. Thank you.
And we're always excited to have you back, especially around something very fun to talk about.
The X1D II was kept out of the rumor mills. How did you even do that?
We have our ways. The rumor mills are the rumor mills, but what we're more focused and excited on is bringing this camera into the world and putting it into the hands of extremely talented photographers.
So Dan, tell us precisely, what's new about this camera?
Definitely. The overall theme is accessibility and usability. One of the complaints around the first generation X1D is the timing, is the responsiveness. So what users will see is that the camera just feels snappier. So things like blackout time between frames, boot time, just the responsiveness of the touch interface just feel right there. And it's for us making that big step towards the perfect camera possible. For us, it's also continuing to evolve. So in the same philosophy and spirit, we'll continue to add features throughout the lifetime of the camera through free firmware updates.
So what would be a good example of something that you've done with firmware which fundamentally alters the capability to an end user?
Definitely. So a good example would be something like autofocus points. When we first introduced the original X1D, it was the same as every other medium format camera, one autofocus point in the center. But through continual updates, we then changed that to movable autofocus points and then now resizable autofocus points. That continues to evolve in the next generation of the X1D by engaging the touch interface on the back screen. So when someone, for example, is using live view, they can just tap to select the focus point. Yeah, and you can still drive autofocus with the shutter button, the rear buttons, and move the points with the dial. So really that hybrid between a touch interface and mechanical controls that worked really well with the original X1D, and we continue to evolve. Also new on this camera, size and display. One of the cool experiences about medium format is when you look through a prism, when you look through the eyepiece, it's like the world just expands in front of you. And with this, the mirrorless medium format camera, users will see two very, very clear things. Externally, the rear LCD is changed to a 3.7-inch LCD, still touchscreen, still beautiful.
It did look bigger.
Yeah. The EVF inside is also larger and now an OLED design. So it's higher resolution, faster frame rate, and gives a greater eye relief, meaning that it is very similar to what people experienced if they're coming from the film era with a mirror prism camera. It's like the world is bigger in front of you.
What was so interesting about the X1D when it came out, aside from the way it felt in the hand, the way it was built, which was quite extraordinary and remains so, it was the promise of bringing high resolution out of the studio and into, in my case, the streets, for other people, landscape, and yet for other people, astrophotography. And some of the firmware updates that you've made address those other two audiences in particular.
Definitely.
Talk to us about that.
So, as with the original X1D found on the H line, the X1D II is also capable of a maximum length shutter exposure of 1 hour. That's
incredible.
Pretty stunning. It does come at a pretty significant challenge for battery life, though.
Yeah.
So right now you're seeing a configuration that's a good example of how we've opened up connectivity for the X1D II. Right now it's tethered to an iPad. We'll touch on that in a second. But what users can also do if they're working in a kind of lockdown landscape, long exposure environment, they can also power the camera from a USB battery brick. So because our camera uses a Type-C connection to any USB certified battery source, power source, now you can trickle charge the battery through it. It also means that if you're traveling, you can recharge the battery in camera via the USB Type-C port.
Nice. Yeah. Nice. Now, I've done landscape long exposure up to about 4 minutes, but in astrophotography, I can really see that long exposure happening. But I can also see the battery just really being challenged. So this is quite good.
And usability connectivity is a big improvement for us as well. So
yeah, let's talk about that because we've got an iPad here and a tether cable. So what can we do with that?
So you touched on earlier out of the studio, and that does describe something that we do want to move forward with. And something that has limited the capability of photography in the past was the tethered shooting limitation. So if you wanted the security of transmitting images to something that isn't inside the camera, it was always a laptop, a desktop computer, where we see an opportunity to really transform that entire experience. So in the past generations of Hasselblad cameras, we've introduced Wi-Fi connectivity, which is great for remote control, shutter speed, live view, and the ability to transmit low-resolution JPEGs.
Yes.
So we think that there's a cool next step for that. So we have the X1D II with its USB Type-C connector, and it's tethered to an iPad Pro. This is a new version of Focus Mobile that will be available on the iPad platform, which really aims to emulate the desktop computer experience, but now even more portable.
This is a big deal to me personally because I've reached that age, man. You're not going to be there for a long time, but I've just reached that age where I don't want to carry any extra weight at all. I don't even want to carry my MacBook Pro 15-inch. I really get it.
Definitely. So Focus Mobile 2 is meant to add an extra dimension to the post-processing and tethered shooting workflow. So at its base mode, you can tether the camera to the iPad. It'll transmit full resolution RAWs or JPEGs into the iPad, and now it's stored. So
Is that an or is it an and?
right now it's an or.
Okay.
We see users really supplementing the RAW-based workflow, having security of storage on another device, and for many users of an iOS device, secondary cloud-based storage.
Sure.
So what's really great is it tethers into our software, and immediately you can export it in full res JPEG, reduced res JPEG, or even the 3FR RAW, which is already supported in the iOS environment.
Yeah. Very nice. Oh. It's fascinating the way the industry is moving very quickly now. It's one thing to try to put connectivity inside cameras, and the industry is not yet as successful as many of us would like it to be. But taking advantage of other tools that are purpose-built for that connectivity makes a great deal of sense.
Definitely. I mean, there are, of course, some things that the wired connection is good for. It's really more stable, especially when you're moving 50 megapixel RAW files around.
Hey, and talk to me about speed, because Wi-Fi makes me pull what little hair I have left out of my head.
Definitely. And using the newer iPad, using a Type-C cable, the camera's transmitting at USB 3 speeds, which is really exciting. Now, we still have Wi-Fi built into the camera, and we've actually even integrated a GPS module, which was previously external. Exactly.
Oh, that's great.
So now, less to carry is an overarching theme for us, too.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, look, I know Hasselblad glass, it's extraordinary. I know Hasselblad build quality, it's extraordinary. The improvements that you've made from processing speed, responsiveness of the rear panel, the improvements in the EVF, I'm really looking forward to taking this out. And I think with that said, I don't want to talk to you anymore, man. I want to go out and shoot. So that's what we're going to do.